The water rushed by in a torrent, reflecting the blood-red sunset as Zara Morgan crumpled to her knees on the riverbank, her sobs nearly drowned by the roaring current. The letter that had brought her world crashing down lay crumpled in her trembling hand, her brother dead, her family ranch seized by the bank, and nowhere left to turn in this unforgiving frontier. Colorado Territory, 1875, was no place for a woman alone, especially one who just lost everything. Yorick Blackwood had been tracking a stray calf along the river when he spotted her a splash of blue calico against the muddy bank, shoulders heaving with grief. He'd seen plenty of hardship in his 30 years, but something about her desolation pierced through the armor he'd built around his heart. He dismounted silently, approaching with the careful steps of a man accustomed to skittish creatures. His spurs jingled softly, alerting her to his presence without startling her. "Madam," he called, voice rough from days of riding alone. "You all right there?" Zara's head snapped up, eyes wide with fear and something else, a desperate hopelessness that struck him harder than any physical blow. She scrambled backward, her boots slipping in the mud as the riverbank crumbled slightly beneath her. "Stay back," she warned, her voice breaking. "I don't need help from anyone." Yorick stopped, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The fading light caught the weathered lines of his face, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, and the genuine concern in his eyes. "No offense intended, madam, but you're awful close to that current, and the Colorado ain't forgiving when it takes hold of someone." Her gaze darted to the churning water just inches from where she knelt. For a moment, Yorick caught a flicker of something in her expression. Perhaps the thought had crossed her mind that the river might solve all her problems. "My name's Yorick Blackwood," he said, taking off his hat. "I ride for the Broken Arrow Ranch. Whatever's troubling you, I reckon there's better answers than that water." She laughed bitterly, brushing away tears with the back of her hand. "There's nothing left for me here. My brother Matthew is dead. The bank's taken everything." She gestured with the crumpled letter. "I've got no home, no family. Nothing." Another chunk of the riverbank gave way beneath her, and she slid several inches toward the rushing water. Yorick lunged forward, his strong hand catching her arm before the river could claim her. "Easy now," he murmured, pulling her away from the edge. She collapsed against him, resistance draining from her body as sobs racked her frame. Without thinking, he wrapped his arms around her, steadying her against the solid wall of his chest. The scent of wildflowers clung to her hair despite her disheveled state, and something protective stirred in him. "Listen to me," he said softly, his breath stirring the loose strands of her dark hair. "Whatever happens, you won't sink. Not today, not ever, if I have anything to say about it." She stiffened in his arms, then slowly looked up at him, her tear-stained face showing confusion mingled with the faintest spark of hope. "Why would you care what happens to me? You don't even know me." Yorick wished he had an answer that made sense. All he knew was that in this harsh territory where men and nature alike showed little mercy, he couldn't bear to see her surrender to despair. "Because no one should face their troubles alone," he said simply. "Not out here." As the last crimson rays of sunlight disappeared behind the distant mountains, Yorick helped Zara to her feet and led her toward his horse. The powerful dun gelding stood patiently, reins dragging in the dirt. "Let me take you somewhere safe for the night," he offered. "Tomorrow, things might look different." Zara hesitated, glancing back at the river that had nearly become her grave. Then she nodded, allowing him to help her into the saddle before he swung up behind her. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the night sounds beginning to emerge from the wilderness around them. "Broken Arrow's main house is half a day's ride," Yorick replied, guiding his horse away from the riverbank. "But my cabin's just beyond that ridge." It ain't much, but there's a roof and a fire. He felt her tense against him. I can't, it wouldn't be proper. You'll take my bed, he assured her. I'll sleep by the hearth. On my honor, madam. As they rode through the gathering darkness, Yorick couldn't explain the certainty growing within him that his life had irrevocably changed the moment he spotted her by the river. All he knew was that he'd made a promise to this stranger, and he'd never broken his word yet. The cabin appeared as they crested the hill, a modest structure of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney, nestled among a stand of pines. A small corral stood empty beside it, and a vegetable garden, now wild with the approach of autumn, spread out behind. "It's not much," Yorick said as he helped Zara dismount. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, exhaustion and emotional turmoil taking their toll. He caught her elbow, steadying her. "It's more than I have," she replied softly. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A bed with a handmade quilt occupied one corner, a table with 2 chairs another. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, and shelves held the few possessions of a man who lived simply. Yorick busied himself lighting the fire while Zara stood awkwardly in the center of the room, clutching her arms around herself, as though holding her broken pieces together. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, noticing how thin her wrists looked, how her dress hung loosely on her frame. She shrugged. "Yesterday, maybe. I don't remember." He nodded and set about preparing a simple meal: beans, bacon, and the last of his cornbread. As the aroma filled the small cabin, Zara gradually relaxed enough to sink into one of the chairs. "My name is Zara Morgan," she finally offered as he placed a steaming plate before her. "My brother and I had a small spread about 20 miles east of here. The Morgan place. I've ridden past it." Yorick sat across from her, watching as she took a tentative bite, then began eating with barely restrained hunger. "Good land." "Was good land," she corrected bitterly. "Matthew took out a loan to buy cattle last spring. Then the fever hit the herd. The bank wouldn't extend the terms after he died." Yorick's jaw tightened. "Whitcomb's bank, I'm guessing." She looked up, surprised. "You know him?" "Everyone knows Edgar Whitcomb. Man's built half his fortune on the misfortunes of others." He shook his head. "I'm sorry about your brother." Zara's eyes welled with tears again, but she blinked them back fiercely. "He was all I had left after our parents died. Now I don't even have his grave to visit. They buried him in the pauper's field while I was away in Denver." Yorick wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but he restrained himself. She'd had enough of men making decisions for her. "What were you doing in Denver?" he asked instead. "Teaching. I took a position at a girls' school last winter when things got tight at the ranch." Her voice grew distant. "I was sending most of my wages home to help Matthew. When his letters stopped coming, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't get away until the term ended." She set down her fork, the weight of her loss stealing her appetite despite her hunger. "I arrived back yesterday to find strangers in our house and that letter waiting for me at the post office." Yorick nodded, understanding dawning. "So you went to the river." "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "I just started walking and ended up there. And then—" She trailed off, unable to confess how close she'd come to surrendering to the current. "Tomorrow," Yorick said firmly, "we'll figure something out. The Broken Arrow's foreman, Mr. Jenkins, is a fair man. His wife might need help with the cooking for the ranch hands, or maybe there's work in town." "Why are you helping me?" Zara asked, the question that had been haunting her since he'd pulled her from the riverbank. "What do you want in return?" Yorick met her gaze steadily. "Not all men want something, Miss Morgan. Some of us just do what's right because it's right." For the first time, a genuine smile touched her lips, small and fleeting, but there nonetheless. "Yorick is an unusual name," he chuckled, relieved at the change of subject. My mother had literary ambitions, named me after some character in a play she admired. My pa just called me Rick. I like Yorick, she decided. It suits you. After the meal, Yorick insisted she take the bed while he made a pallet near the fire. As she settled beneath the quilt that smelled of pine and leather and something uniquely him, Zara found herself studying her unlikely rescuer. In the firelight, she could see that he was handsome in a rugged way, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His hands were calloused from work, but they had been gentle when he helped her from the river. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet cabin, "for everything." Yorick looked up from tending the fire, his expression softening. "Get some rest, Miss Morgan. Dawn comes early out here." "Zara," she corrected. "Please call me Zara." He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Good night, Zara." As she drifted into the first restful sleep she'd had in weeks, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that despite everything she'd lost, something important had been found on that riverbank, something that might just save them both. Morning came with pale golden light filtering through the cabin's single window. Zara woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up to find the cabin empty, though the fire had been built up and a pot of coffee simmered on the small cast-iron stove. She rose, smoothing her rumpled dress as best she could, and went to the door. Outside, Yorick was chopping wood, his shirt discarded in the cool morning air. The play of muscles across his back as he swung the axe made her cheeks flush, and she stepped back inside before he noticed her watching. A few minutes later, he entered with an armload of split logs, stopping short when he saw her standing by the table. "Thought you might sleep longer," he said, setting down the wood. "Coffee's hot if you want some." "Thank you." She accepted the cup he poured her, grateful for something to do with her hands. "I should be on my way soon. I've imposed enough." Yorick frowned, reaching for his shirt and shrugging it on. "And where exactly would you be heading?" The question hung between them, highlighting the reality of her situation. Zara had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. "I thought perhaps Silver Creek might have worked," she said, naming the nearest town, though it was still a good 15 miles away. "Silver Creek's no place for a woman alone," Yorick replied firmly. "The mining booms brought in all sorts, most of them not the kind you'd want to encounter." Zara's spine stiffened. "I can take care of myself." "Never said you couldn't," he held her gaze. "But there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered, Zara." The way he said her name soft yet certain made something flutter in her chest. She looked away, unsettled by the feeling. "I have a proposition," Yorick continued. "The Broken Arrow's owner, Mr. Sullivan, is looking for a tutor for his daughters. They had one from back east, but she married a shopkeeper in Denver last month and didn't return." Hope flickered in Zara's eyes. "I'm qualified. I have experience." "I figured as much," he nodded. "I'm heading to the main house today to deliver a message from the line camp. Come with me, meet the Sullivans. If they like you, you'd have a position and a place to stay." The offer was too good to refuse, though Zara couldn't help wondering at her good fortune after so much tragedy. "Why would you do this for me?" Yorick smiled, a slow, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "Let's just say I believe in second chances." 2 hours later, they were riding across the vast expanse of the Broken Arrow Ranch. Yorick had found a spare horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, for Zara to ride. The land stretched out in all directions, golden grass rippling in the morning breeze, cattle dotting the distant hillsides. "How long have you worked here?" Zara asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Going on 5 years now," Yorick replied. "Came west after the war looking for something different." The hesitation in his voice suggested there was more to the story. "You fought in the war between the states," he nodded, his expression growing distant. "Union cavalry. Saw things no man should see." Zara studied his profile, noting the shadow that crossed his features. "My father and brother fought too. Father didn't come home. Matthew was never the same after." Their shared understanding of loss created a bond between them, unspoken but powerful. "The broken arrow helped me find my way back," Yorick said after a while. "Mr. Sullivan served too. He understands what it's like to carry those memories. And is he a good employer?" Zara couldn't help but ask, anxiety about her future creeping back in. "One of the best. Fair wages, decent conditions. Mrs. Sullivan treats the hands like family." Yorick smiled reassuringly. "Their daughters, Abigail's 12 and Hannah's 10, are good girls, spirited but good-hearted." The main house came into view as they crested a rise, a substantial two-story structure of white painted wood with a wide veranda wrapping around it. Several outbuildings and a large barn stood nearby, and a bunkhouse sat a respectful distance away. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the morning sun. She was in her 40s, handsome rather than pretty, with streaks of silver in her dark hair. "Yorick Blackwood, is that you?" she called. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Change of plans, Mrs. Sullivan," he replied, dismounting and helping Zara from her horse. "I've brought someone I'd like you to meet." Margaret Sullivan's keen eyes took in Zara's travel-worn appearance, but her smile remained warm as she extended her hand. "Welcome to Broken Arrow, Miss Morgan, Zara Morgan." She straightened her shoulders, determined to make a good impression despite her circumstances. "I understand you might be in need of a tutor for your daughters." "Indeed we are," Mrs. Sullivan replied, glancing curiously at Yorick. "Why don't you both come inside?" "My husband is in town today, but we can discuss the position over some tea." The interior of the house was comfortable without being ostentatious. Polished wood floors covered with colorful rugs, solid furniture, and walls adorned with paintings that spoke of Mrs. Sullivan's refined taste. She led them to a sunny parlor and excused herself to arrange for refreshments. "She seems kind," Zara whispered to Yorick, who had removed his hat and looked surprisingly at ease in these more genteel surroundings. "The Sullivans are good people," he confirmed. "They built all this from nothing 15 years ago." When Mrs. Sullivan returned, she was accompanied by two girls, one tall and serious with her mother's dark hair, the other smaller with auburn curls and a curious expression. "My daughters, Abigail and Hannah," she introduced. "Girls, this is Miss Morgan. She might become your new teacher." Abigail curtsied properly, but Hannah stepped forward, eyes bright with interest. "Do you know geography, Miss Morgan? Our last teacher couldn't explain why the earth doesn't fall when it's spinning." Zara couldn't help but smile. "I do know geography and a bit about why the earth stays in its orbit. Would you like me to explain it to you?" For the next hour, Zara found herself engaged in conversation with the girls and their mother, discussing education, literature, and what subjects the curriculum should include. Throughout it all, Yorick remained quietly in the background, watching with an expression Zara couldn't quite decipher. "Well," Mrs. Sullivan said finally, "I believe we've found our new tutor, if you're agreeable, Miss Morgan. Room and board here at the main house, plus a monthly salary of $25. You'd have Sundays to yourself, of course." The offer was generous, more than Zara had earned at the school in Denver. "I would be most grateful for the opportunity, Mrs. Sullivan." "Excellent." The older woman clapped her hands together. "Abigail, show Miss Morgan to the blue room. Hannah, ask Mrs. Chen to prepare a bath for our guest." The girls hurried off, excited by the new addition to their household. Mrs. Sullivan turned to Yorick with a knowing smile. Found her by the river, did you? She asked quietly. Yorick nodded, not bothering to ask how she knew. Margaret Sullivan had always possessed an uncanny ability to read situations. She needed help, he said simply. And you've always had a soft heart beneath that rough exterior, Mrs. Sullivan replied. She patted his arm affectionately. Stay for supper, Yorick. Mr. Sullivan will want to thank you for bringing such a qualified teacher to our doorstep. Later, after Zara had bathed and changed into a borrowed dress that fit her reasonably well, she found Yorick waiting on the veranda. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, and a peaceful quiet had settled over the ranch. You look more yourself, he observed as she joined him at the railing. I feel more myself, she admitted. I can't thank you enough, Yorick. You've given me a new beginning when I thought everything was ending. He shook his head. You earned this position on your own merits. I just made the introduction. They stood in companionable silence, watching as ranch hands returned from their day's work, the distant lowing of cattle creating a soothing backdrop. Will I see you again? Zara asked suddenly, surprising herself with the question. I mean, do you come to the main house often? Yorick turned to her, his expression softening. I'm usually out with the herds, but I make it back every couple of weeks for supplies. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to check on you if that's all right. The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than she expected. I'd like that too. As they were called in to supper, Zara realized that for the first time since receiving the news of her brother's death, she was looking forward to tomorrow. The river's pull seemed distant now, replaced by something far more powerful, hope. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm for Zara. Mornings were devoted to teaching the Sullivan girls in the bright schoolroom Mr. Sullivan had added to the east wing of the house. Afternoons often found her helping Mrs. Sullivan with household accounts or correspondence, skills Zara possessed that made her even more valuable to the family. The Sullivans treated her with respect and growing affection. Mr. Sullivan, a tall man with a booming laugh and kind eyes, had welcomed her warmly upon his return from town, declaring that anyone Yorick Blackwood vouched for was welcome at Broken Arrow. Yet despite her comfortable new circumstances, Zara found her thoughts drifting often to the quiet cowboy who had pulled her from the brink. True to his word, Yorick appeared at the main house every few weeks. Each visit seemed to bring him a little closer to her, their conversations growing deeper, more personal. It was during one such visit, nearly 2 months after her arrival, that Yorick found Zara in the kitchen garden, harvesting the last of the autumn vegetables before the first frost. Mrs. Sullivan said I'd find you out here, he said, approaching with his hat in his hands. He looked different, somehow freshly shaven, his hair neatly trimmed, wearing a clean shirt she hadn't seen before. Yorick, Zara couldn't keep the pleasure from her voice. I didn't know you were coming today. Wasn't planned, he admitted, but I have news I thought you should hear. Something in his tone made her set down her basket. What is it? It's about your brother's property. Yorick shifted, uncharacteristically nervous. I've been asking around, trying to find out what happened after the bank took it. Zara's heart constricted. She tried to put thoughts of her lost home behind her, but the pain was still fresh. And Whitcomb sold it to a man named Preston, who's been trying to sell it off in parcels but hasn't found buyers. Yorick met her eyes. The house and 20 acres are still intact. Hope and anguish warred within her. What good does that do me? I could never afford to buy it back. Maybe not alone, Yorick said quietly, but I've been saving most of my wages these past years. I've got nearly $800 set aside. Zara stared at him, uncomprehending. Yorick, what are you saying? He took a deep breath. I'm saying that with my savings and a loan, mister. Sullivan has offered to help secure. We could buy back the house and enough land to make a start. We, the word hung between them, full of implication. Yorick stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Zara, I know it hasn't been long and maybe I'm overstepping, but these past weeks, getting to know you better. He faltered, then squared his shoulders. I'm asking if you'd consider a partnership, a life together, rebuilding what was taken from you. Stunned silence followed his words. Of all the things Zara had expected him to say, this wasn't among them. You want to marry me, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. I want the chance to court you properly, he clarified, to see if what I'm feeling, what I think you might be feeling too, could grow into something lasting. Zara's mind raced. She couldn't deny the connection that had formed between them, the way her heart quickened whenever he appeared at the ranch, how their conversations lingered in her thoughts for days afterward. But your position here, she protested weakly. You'd give that up. I've talked to Mr. Sullivan. He understands. Yorick smiled slightly. Said he's been expecting something like this since the day I brought you here with that look in my eyes. What look? Zara asked, genuinely curious, like I'd found something I didn't know I was searching for. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. I don't expect an answer today. Just think about it. Before she could respond, Hannah's voice called from the house, summoning her for the afternoon lessons. Yorick stepped back, replacing his hat. I'll be staying through tomorrow, he said. Take your time. That night, Zara barely slept, her mind filled with possibilities she had never dared consider. By morning, she knew her answer, but it wasn't until late afternoon that she found an opportunity to speak with Yorick alone. He was in the stable, brushing down his horse when she approached. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, his expression guarded but hopeful. I've been thinking about your proposal, Zara began, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. And Yorick set down the brush, giving her his full attention. I'm not sure I'm ready for marriage, she admitted. It's too soon and I've only just found my footing here. His face fell slightly, but he nodded. I understand. But, she continued, stepping closer, I would like to accept your offer of courtship, to see where this feeling between us might lead. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. That's all I'm asking for, Zara. A chance. As for the property, she added, I'm deeply touched by your offer, but I can't let you risk your savings that way. Not yet. Yorick reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. What if we look at it together first? No decisions, just seeing what might be possible. The thought of returning to her family home was both painful and compelling. When? I have 3 days before I need to return to the line camp. We could ride out tomorrow if the Sullivans can spare you, Mrs. Sullivan not only spared her, but insisted they take a picnic basket and return before dark, her eyes twinkling with barely concealed approval. The next morning dawned clear and cool, perfect for riding. As they approached the Morgan property, Zara felt a tightness in her chest that was part grief, part homecoming. The small farmhouse came into view, weathered but still standing, its windows dark and empty. The barn needed repairs, and weeds had overtaken the garden, but it was still recognizably the place where she had grown up. You all right? Yorick asked softly as they dismounted. Zara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He seemed to understand, keeping a respectful distance as she walked slowly toward the house, memories flooding back with each step. The door was unlocked. Who would bother to steal from an abandoned homestead? And Zara pushed it open with trembling hands. Inside, dust covered the familiar furniture, but otherwise, it was as if time had stopped the day her brother died. Matthew's books are still here, she murmured, running her fingers along the spines on the small bookshelf. And Mother's china cabinet, Yorick remained in the doorway, allowing her this private reunion with her past. When she finally turned to him, there were tears in her eyes, but determination as well. "It could be a home again," she said, "with work and care." He stepped inside then, looking around with a craftsman's eye. "Roof needs some attention. Floors are solid, though. Good bones." They explored the rest of the house and then the outbuildings. Despite months of neglect, the property had weathered well. The land itself, rich soil that had supported the Morgan family for years, lay fallow but full of potential. They ate their picnic on a hillside overlooking the small creek that bordered the property, talking of practical matters: repairs needed, costs, the viability of raising cattle or perhaps horses on the reduced acreage. "We could make it work," Yorick concluded, his confidence bolstering Zara's growing conviction. "Not right away, but with time and effort." "We," Zara repeated softly. The word no longer frightened her. Instead, it filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "I like the sound of that." Yorick's eyes met hers, and without words, he leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, his lips found hers in a gentle kiss that promised far more than words ever could. As they rode back to the Broken Arrow that evening, Zara felt as though her life had turned yet another corner, not back to what was lost, but forward to something new and full of promise. Over the next few months, Yorick's courtship proceeded with the same quiet determination that characterized everything he did. Each visit to the main house brought small tokens: wildflowers, a book of poetry he'd found in Silver Creek, once even a calico kitten that had been orphaned at the line camp. Between visits, there were letters, Yorick's handwriting surprisingly elegant for a cowboy, his thoughts expressed with a depth that continually surprised and delighted Zara. She responded in kind, their written conversations often more intimate than what they dared say face to face. The Sullivans watched their blossoming relationship with benevolent approval. Mrs. Sullivan occasionally offered gentle guidance, while Mr. Sullivan regaled Zara with stories of Yorick's bravery and reliability, as if ensuring she knew the quality of the man who sought her heart. By early spring, Zara had saved enough from her teaching position to contribute to their shared dream. Together with Yorick, she met with Mr. Sullivan's banker, not Whitcomb, but a competitor who took particular pleasure in financing the recovery of property Whitcomb had seized. The day they signed the papers reclaiming the Morgan homestead was bright with promise. Yorick officially gave notice at the Broken Arrow, though Mr. Sullivan insisted he stay on as needed until the transition was complete. "You've been more than just a hand here," the rancher told him. "You're family, and family helps family." With the Sullivans' blessing, Zara continued teaching their daughters while helping Yorick begin the restoration of her family home. Weekends found them working side by side, Yorick repairing the roof and outbuildings, Zara clearing the garden and making the house livable once more. It was during one such weekend, as summer approached, that Yorick finally asked the question that had been building between them for months. They had finished a long day of work. The house now boasted new curtains at the windows and fresh paint on the exterior. The garden was beginning to sprout with vegetables, and the small corral held 2 horses and a milk cow, gifts from the Sullivans. As the sun set, casting golden light across the newly mended porch, Yorick took Zara's hand and led her to the old wooden swing her father had built years ago. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice slightly rough with emotion, "about the future, our future." Zara squeezed his hand encouragingly. "So have I." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I'm not a man of many words, Zara, but I know what I want, and that's a life with you, here on this land, building something that will last." From the pouch, He tipped a ring into his palm, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the fading sunlight. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She made me promise I'd only give it to someone truly special." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as he continued, his voice gaining strength and certainty. "Zara Morgan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of sharing this home and whatever life brings us, good or bad, rich or poor?" She didn't hesitate, not for a moment. "Yes, Yorick. Yes, with all my heart." The kiss that followed sealed their promise to each other, deep and tender and full of dreams yet to be realized. They were married 2 weeks later in the Broken Arrows parlor, with the Sullivans standing as witnesses and their daughters scattering wildflower petals. Zara wore a new dress of pale blue silk, Mrs. Sullivan's gift, and carried a bouquet of prairie flowers Yorick had gathered that morning. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, the small gathering filled with genuine affection for the couple who had found each other against all odds. "I never thought I'd find happiness again that day by the river," Zara whispered to her new husband as they shared their first dance. "You pulled me back from more than just the water." Yorick's arms tightened around her. "And you saved me from a loneliness I'd stopped noticing until you showed me what I was missing." Their wedding night was a sweet discovery of each other, tender and passionate in equal measure. Yorick's strength tempered by gentleness, Zara's reserve melting into wholehearted giving. By morning, they had forged a bond deeper than either had dared hope for when they first met on that riverbank. Life as newlyweds on their small ranch was challenging but rewarding. Zara continued teaching the Sullivan girls 3 days a week, riding back and forth on Daisy, the mare that had become hers in all but name until Mr. Sullivan officially presented her as a wedding gift. Yorick took occasional work with neighboring ranches during busy seasons, but increasingly focused on building their own enterprise. With careful management and hard work, they added to their livestock first a small herd of cattle, then several quality horses Yorick began training for sale. They welcomed visitors. Often the Sullivans came for Sunday dinners, and ranch hands Yorick had worked with stopped by when passing through. Their home became known for its warmth and hospitality, a haven in the sometimes harsh frontier. 6 months into their marriage, as winter settled over the Colorado territory, Zara shared news that brought tears of joy to Yorick's eyes. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Zara nodded, covering his hand with hers. "Due in early summer, according to my calculations." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Yorick whispered promises to her and their unborn child of protection and provision, of love that would never waver, of a legacy they would build together. The pregnancy progressed well, with Mrs. Sullivan providing advice and support as Zara's body changed. Yorick became even more protective, insisting on accompanying her to and from the Broken Arrow for her teaching days, watching over her with devoted attention. Spring brought new life to their land calves in the pasture, foals in the corral, and crops sprouting in the expanded fields Yorick had plowed. Their small ranch was beginning to thrive, just as the child within Zara grew stronger each day. It was on a warm June evening, with fireflies just beginning to appear in the twilight, that Zara felt the first pains. Yorick had been expecting this, had hardly slept for weeks in anticipation, and sprang into action with surprising calm. He helped her to their bed, then rode at breakneck speed to fetch Mrs. Sullivan and the midwife from Silver Creek. By the time they returned, Zara's labor was well established, her face drawn with pain but determined. "You're doing beautifully," the midwife assured her after an examination. "This baby knows exactly what to do." Mrs. Sullivan shooed Yorick from the room despite his protests. "Go boil water and then wait on the porch," she ordered. "We'll call you when there's news." The hours that followed were the longest of Yorick's life. He paced the porch, flinching at each cry that came from within, praying with an intensity he hadn't felt since the darkest days of the war. When the sun rose, painting the eastern sky with streaks of gold and pink, a new sound finally broke the morning stillness, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Sullivan appeared at the door, her face tired but radiant. "You have a daughter, Yorick, a beautiful, healthy little girl." He nearly knocked her over in his haste to reach Zara's side. The sight that greeted him stole his breath away. His wife, exhausted but glowing with triumph, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your daughter," Zara invited softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a perfect little face with a dusting of dark hair. Yorick approached with reverence, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. When Zara placed their child in his arms, his hands capable of breaking wild horses and wrestling steers trembled. "She's perfect," he whispered, a tear sliding unchecked down his weathered cheek. "Just like her mother." "What shall we name her?" Zara asked, leaning against his shoulder to gaze at their creation. Yorick considered the tiny life in his arms, this miraculous blend of himself and the woman he loved. "Hope," he said finally. "Because that's what you gave me that day by the river and what she represents for our future." "Hope Morgan Blackwood," Zara agreed. "A perfect name for a perfect girl." In the days that followed, they settled into new routines centered around their daughter's needs. Yorick proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable rocking Hope to sleep as he was mending fences or breaking horses. Visitors came to meet the newest resident of the Morgan Blackwood ranch, the Sullivans, of course, bearing gifts and advice. Neighboring ranchers and their wives. Even the banker who had helped them reclaim the property, proud to see the fruits of his investment. Life wasn't without challenges. That autumn brought early storms that threatened their harvest, and a sickness among the cattle required Yorick to work around the clock to save the herd. But through it all, the foundation they had built of love, respect, and partnership remained unshaken. As Hope's first birthday approached, bringing with it the anniversary of their wedding, Yorick and Zara sat on their porch swing watching the sunset. Their daughter slept peacefully in Zara's arms, her little face relaxed in perfect trust. "Did you ever imagine this?" Yorick asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders, his free hand gently stroking his daughter's dark curls. "That day when I found you by the river," Zara leaned into his embrace, her heart full beyond measure. "Never. I thought my life was ending that day. And instead—" he prompted, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Instead, it was just beginning." She turned her face up to his, eyes shining with love and contentment. "You promised I'd never sink, Yorick. You kept that promise and gave me so much more. I'll keep all my promises to you," he vowed. "For all the days we have." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Yorick Blackwood held his family close, marveling at how a moment of despair had led to such profound joy. The river that had nearly claimed Zara now flowed peacefully beyond their property, a reminder of how quickly life could change from desperation to hope, from solitude to love, from endings to beautiful new beginnings. And in the quiet of that perfect moment, with his wife and child safe in his arms and their home solid beneath them, Yorick knew with absolute certainty that some promises were meant to last forever. The years flowed by like the river that had brought them together, sometimes rushing with events, other times moving in a peaceful, steady rhythm. Hope grew from a toddling, curious child into a spirited young girl with her father's quiet strength and her mother's quick intelligence. She loved the ranch with a passion that delighted both her parents, following Yorick around from the moment she could walk, insisting on helping with every task. When Hope was 3, the Blackwood family welcomed another addition, a son they named Matthew, after Zara's brother. Unlike his sister's dramatic entrance into the world, Matthew arrived with such speed that Yorick himself delivered the baby before the midwife could arrive, a fact he recounted with a mixture of terror and pride for years afterward. The children brought a new dimension to their love story, watching Yorick teach Hope to ride her first pony, or seeing the gentle way Zara introduced Matthew to books and letters deepened the bond between them. They were partners in every sense, building not just a ranch but a legacy for their children. By the time Hope was 8 and Matthew 5, the Morgan Blackwood Ranch had expanded to include nearly 100 acres, a respectable herd of cattle, and Yorick's growing reputation as a horse trainer. They had added rooms to the original house, built a new barn, and hired 2 permanent hands to help with the increased workload. Zara no longer taught at the Broken Arrow, but she had established a small school in their home for their children and those of neighboring ranchers. 3 days a week, the sound of young voices reciting lessons and singing songs filled what had once been their dining room, now converted into a cheerful classroom. The Sullivans remained dear friends, though advancing age had led them to scale back their own ranching operations, with their oldest son taking over most of the management of the Broken Arrow. Their daughters, now young women, visited often, Abigail preparing for marriage to a Denver businessman, Hannah pursuing studies at a women's college back east. Life wasn't without its hardships. A particularly harsh winter when Matthew was 2 had decimated half their cattle herd, forcing them to start again almost from nothing. The following summer, a prairie fire threatened their home, and only a desperate firebreak dug by Yorick and neighboring ranchers saved their buildings. But through every challenge, their partnership grew stronger. They faced each obstacle together, drawing strength from their love and their shared determination to create a secure future for their children. It was during the 10th spring after their marriage that Zara received unexpected news. A letter arrived from a lawyer in Denver, informing her that Edgar Whitcomb, the banker who had seized her brother's property, had died. In a surprising twist of fate, an audit of his business affairs had revealed numerous instances of fraud and illegal foreclosures, including the Morgan Ranch. "They're offering restitution," Zara told Yorick that evening, her voice shaking as she reread the letter. "For the livestock that was on the property when Matthew died, for the crops that were harvested after the foreclosure, even for the furniture and personal items that were sold." Yorick whistled softly, looking over her shoulder at the substantial sum mentioned. "That would pay off our loan entirely, with enough left to buy that water rights parcel we've been eyeing." Zara folded the letter carefully. "It feels like Matthew can finally rest in peace. Like justice has been done, even if it took 10 years. That night, after the children were asleep, they walked to the small family cemetery on the hill behind their home. There, beside the graves of Zara's parents, stood a marker for Matthew Morgan, though his body lay miles away in an unmarked pauper's grave. "I wish you could see what we've built, Matthew," Zara said softly, placing wildflowers on the stone. "I think you'd be proud." Yorick stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "We'll use part of that money to give him a proper headstone in town," he promised, "and maybe donate something to the church in his name." Zara leaned into his embrace, grateful once again for this man who understood her so completely. "I'd like that." The restitution money allowed them to expand their operations further. They purchased the adjoining water rights, ensuring their ranch would never suffer during drought years. Yorick was able to build the larger horse barn he'd been planning, with a special area for training the quality stock he now raised. Hope, approaching her teenage years, showed a remarkable talent with horses that surpassed even her father's. By 12, she could gentle the most skittish colt, her patience and intuitive understanding of the animals earning her a reputation throughout the territory. Matthew, quieter but equally determined, revealed a gift for numbers and management that complemented his sister's practical skills. Together, the Blackwood children represented the perfect blend of their parents' strengths. As their 15th wedding anniversary approached, Yorick began planning a surprise for Zara. With the children's enthusiastic cooperation, he arranged for them to stay with the Sullivans for a week, while he took Zara on a trip to Denver, their first real vacation since their marriage. "We've never been anywhere just the two of us," he told her as they boarded the train, her face alight with excitement. 15 years deserve something special. Denver had grown considerably since Zara had last visited. Now a bustling city with paved streets, electric lights, and all the amenities of modern life, it offered a welcome change from the routine of ranch life. Yorick had reserved rooms at the finest hotel, arranged tickets to the theater, and planned dinners at restaurants where they could enjoy leisurely meals without interruption from children or ranch responsibilities. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most, walking arm in arm through the city park, browsing bookshops where Zara could select volumes for her school, sitting together on their hotel balcony watching the sunset over the distant mountains. "You ever regret it?" Yorick asked one evening as they prepared for bed, "Giving up teaching in the city for ranch life?" "For me." Zara paused in brushing her hair, studying his reflection in the mirror. Even after 15 years, the sight of him still quickened her heart, the silver now threading through his dark hair, the lines of laughter around his eyes only adding to his appeal. "Not for a single moment," she answered truthfully. "Everything I value most came from that choice: our home, our children, our life together." She set down her brush and turned to face him. "What about you? Do you ever regret pulling a weeping stranger from the riverbank?" Yorick crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his. "That was the best decision I ever made," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day with you has been a gift, Zara, one I never thought I'd have." Their kiss was as tender as their first, yet deepened by years of shared experiences, joys and sorrows, triumphs and failures, all woven together into the fabric of their marriage. When they returned home, refreshed and reconnected, they found their ranch thriving under their children's careful supervision. Hope proudly showed them a new foal born during their absence, while Matthew presented meticulously kept accounts of the week's business. That evening, as they sat on their porch, the same swing still hanging where Yorick had proposed, though repaired and repainted over the years, Zara felt a sense of completion she had never imagined possible when she stood weeping by the river all those years ago. "Look at what we've created," she said softly, gesturing toward their expanded home, the well-tended fields, the children laughing as they chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. Yorick followed her gaze, his expression one of profound satisfaction. "From that day by the river to this moment, it's been quite a journey." "And it's not over yet," Zara reminded him, resting her head against his shoulder. "We have so much still ahead, watching the children grow up, seeing what they become, growing old together." "Growing old with you was always my plan," Yorick said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "From the moment I promised you wouldn't sink." As darkness settled over their land and stars appeared in the vast Colorado sky, Yorick and Zara Blackwood held each other close, secure in the knowledge that some promises were kept not just for a moment or a day, or even a year, but for a lifetime. And in that keeping, they had found a love deeper and more enduring than either had dared to dream possible. The river that had once nearly claimed Zara's life now flowed peacefully through their property, a constant reminder of how a single moment a hand extended in the darkest hour could change everything. What had begun as rescue had transformed into something far more profound. A love story written across the wild frontier, built on courage, faith, and the unwavering promise that together they would never sink.